So the account of the fall of Adam and Eve in Garden of Eden is a fascinating portrayal for anyone in the journey of creativity and imagination. What happens to us when we take over the narrative, when we become the one at the core of existence? And yet when we begin to create as an artist, as a writer, as a filmmaker, as a dancer, we always have this temptation to take over, to live in our egos rather than to think of the other, to take the world unto ourselves rather than give away our gifts for the sake of the others. I'm painting a Columbine, or 2 or 3 or 4, and I started to do the series after that incident in Colorado, in Littleton, Colorado, Columbine High School incident, which seemed so shocking at the time, right? And now that we know that was just the beginning. Started thinking about these kids, high school students, amassing these weapons, and these kids in the library just being who they are. High school students full of promise for the future. And their lives are pulverized that morning. When I talk to artists about this failure of humanity from the beginning to rebel against God's order in creation, we already understand this. A child would understand this. But it is a difficult concept because we have been trained to think that we are indeed in control and that we have everything we need to fix the problem. I walked around the mountains of Colorado with my kids, and I saw, surely there must have been thousands of them, these beautiful flowers. But then I saw these flowers in the shade, beneath the pine trees. And the purple leaf, the outer leaf, were completely white because they weren't getting this direct sun. And I thought that was such a beautiful symbol of the souls of these young kids, struggling, right, to find their own in their journeys. Dr. Kurt Thompson invited to be part of this journey as a psychiatrist, author who understands neurosciences and understands human psychology. And it's such an important bridge because to him, new creation is happening in our brains. When we are finding healing from trauma, when we're in a room together, when we begin to open up these new possibilities, using our imagination to journey into something new. And that is critical to understand that all of us are makers, whether we are trained artists or not. And how we think about the future is how we begin our journey toward new creation.
Notion that the scientific progression itself, what we're learning about the way the mind and the brain works, suggests in and of itself that the very scientific method that we think we should be using is really not the way that we should be using it. And so the science is actually doubling back on itself, and I think is really bearing witness to this artistry, bearing witness to this making, bearing witness to this notion that we were made to make. We were created to create.
My name is Kurt Thompson. I'm a psychiatrist in private practice, and our work in the last 15 years has really moved in this direction of really paying attention to the emerging work in neuroscience and attachment research.
You know, when Paul writes Therefore, don't be conformed to this world. The world is always trying to squeeze us into that mold, and God is always calling us out of that. And Paul then says, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that renewing, it's not just a thing that happens one time. It's continually happening.
One of the things that we find is that when we are describing and helping to explain to people what is taking place in one's encounter with beauty, in one's encounter with suffering, it actually makes it more likely for them to want to repeat and engage in that practice. But it is in those moments in which our despair is the worst, that when someone persistently, lovingly, kindly comes to find us in that ugliness, the very moment of being found is a transformative one.
Theology or making is a process. The process of not just trying to fix or to restore your life, but to a journey toward this new creation. And so that leads into redemption, how we really cannot solve this on our own. And we are dependent on the Creator again to invite us into some other journey that will require a greater sacrifice by God, by Jesus Himself.